Hello again, everybody. This is Steve. Picking up where we left off at last time with Chester Westman. Um, yeah, this guy, he seems like he's, a fine Southern gentleman, and, he's just a rail tycoon, and, he's there to help people, and uh, he's anything but that. He's very much an opportunist. He is greedy. He is corrupt. And the funny part is, all the way through all of this, his Southern flair never disappears. And he isn't a dig on Southern people. He's just that cliche bad guy who happens to have that Southern swagger to him. But yeah, he is totally about making the money. And one thing that's funny is he's not the only rail tycoon in Offworld. There are a number of other rail tycoons. He just happens to be one of the biggest and most I can't say brutal. It's it's definitely one of the greediest, one of the most productive. When you first meet him, is in what is it? I think it's Gold Rush is when you first meet him. When Simon and no, I take that back. It's Dragon's Gambit, because it's after the Four Kingdoms scene. You meet him, and it's kind of funny because or is it Dragon's Gambit? No, it would be Gold Rush. That's right. Yeah, because it's after the Four Kingdoms section, and basically what happens is he's got railroads all the way through the Westlands. He's a big, because the Westlands are so big and the towns are so far apart, he's a big one, taking people between towns, because, you can take a stagecoach and take several weeks to get where you got to go. Or you can take a train and get there in a couple hours. So because of that, he has just made himself nice and rich. And after the unified armies of the Four Kingdoms take the city of Ruby, which is one that Simon's team goes through, after they razz that and burn that to the ground, which that's an interesting situation, but after that gets burned to the ground, Chester comes back in there, renames it Renata, which, let's see, come up here. Oops. It's basically, Renata is basically the name given to the city because if I remember correctly, it means kind of like rebirth, renewal, so basically they're taking the ashes of the old city, they take those away and toss them to the side, and then just build a whole brand new city. So the city is just literally started from the ground up, because all its previous residents are dead. Its previous buildings are just burned to the ground. They're just piles of ash. And the city is just completely decimated. And he comes in there, and using the money from his little train empire, he completely rebuilds the city. He tries to be this little benevolent despot at the beginning, but that kind of backfires on him, and the people come after him, and he has to back up and let them have freedom that he doesn't want them to have, because he wants to control everything, because he wants to literally milk every single person for every single dime that he can while he's building this city. His brother Dell isn't much better, although Dell isn't quite as bad as Chester is, but yeah, Chester's a real piece of work. What's funny is when you get into the After Offworld series, Chester meets his match in Mellor Calloway. Book isn't released, so I'm not going to tell you much more than that, but let's just say that he definitely does not like Mellor, because Mellor just makes his efforts at being rich and greedy very, very difficult. So anyways, Chief Director Clifford Pitts. Craven already. Oh, Dietrich Rogers. I like this. Dietrich Rogers, a.k.a. the Professor. He, just like Mal Ratnar, is a former controller. He's retired. And what's interesting about him is at one point in time, I mean, he still is to some degree, but at one point in time, he was the chief information officer for the syndicate. And when I say chief information officer, I'm not talking like information systems or computers or technology. He did parts of that, but his basic purpose in the syndicate, Section 17, basically. He was he wasn't an agent. He was just an employee, and his job was to gather and gather, filter, process, and disseminate information. He is like the ultimate information nerd. This guy's collection of information is massive. One of the things you'll find when you get into Book 7, you meet the professor for the first time in Book 7. And one of the things you find out with him is he has this just super massive library, and this thing is bigger than all the libraries of the world combined. That's how much information he has. The funny part about it is that library is entirely digital and entirely virtual, and it is represented by it's a room that I think probably the best closest example to this, and I say closest because it's not accurate 100%, but it would be a reasonable representation of this, is his quote-unquote library is essentially kind of this, if you've ever watched Star Trek, especially like Deep Space Nine, they had the Hollow Suites. It's kind of that same idea. Or if you look at Earthfleet, they had the Hollow Rooms, where it's just a gigantic room where they project holograms into it, and you live in there just as though it was, everything in there was real. It's kind of the same idea, except in his case, it's this gigantic library inside this little 20 by 20 room, holographic library. It's kind of cool because you can actually call up books based on, you can either go up to the bookshelf and pull a book off and read the book that way, or like in his case, he's learned how to manipulate the system in such a way that if he wants a particular book or wants to learn a particular thing, he just thinks about it and requests it in his mind, and boop, there comes the book in his hand. And it's really cool, and it'll even flip open to the page what he's looking for. So it's a neat little library system. One other interesting thing about him is back when he was working for Section 17, he through the process of his research eventually came to know Christ as a Savior. He didn't have anybody lead him or anything like that. He would hit just all the information he was going through. He was curious enough. He went in, looked through it, studied it, understood it, realized his need for salvation, and got saved. And he also left Section 17 a short time after that, because once he got saved, his eyes were open and he started realizing, wait, these guys are like super evil. I really shouldn't be here anymore. So he retired. The Section 17 still kind of relies on him. There's a different person who took over his job who wasn't anywhere near as good as he was. So every so often, Section 17 would come over and pick his brains for stuff because of all of the knowledge he had, the information he gathered. And, he's actually also very benevolent and helps a lot of people. He lives up in Terrafall, which Terrafall is an interesting kingdom. It's a mountain kingdom, and what's interesting about this is the fact that it's It's in the Wendrock Mountains, and the Wendrock Mountains are similar to the White Mountains, but not the same. Uh, they're very high mountains, and it's interesting because the racing trail winds through these mountains, and because of that, a bunch of people, basically the long and short of it is, there were racers in the past who went through this area and got up to the fifth hextant, didn't want to go on to the sixth hextant, but didn't want to stay in the fifth because they knew what that would mean, that they would get trapped there, and eventually, if you're there long enough, controllers turn on you, and they're like, if you want to stay here, you have to become our slave. Otherwise, get out. So they were either thrown out or they got out on their own and went back up into the mountains. And they built a kingdom there, which was Terrafall. And sure, I love this. Every time I start these recordings, I start yawning, but if I'm not doing the recordings, I'm not yawning. Go figure that out. Anyways, they created Terrafall, which is kind of like a medieval kingdom in the mountains. It kind of operates that way. And the professor ended up moving there too. And the kingdom it's one of those ones that it's a good kingdom, but it's one that just kind of barely survives year to year because of where they're at. Because they're up so high, they have a very short growing year. Way shorter than everybody else. Because like everyone else has between 4 and 4.5 months to grow stuff, these guys have 3. Now, the trees in the area have adapted to this. So they can, the trees, the plants, the crops, even the crops they grow are adapted such that they can survive in this type of environment. And one of the other things that developed as a result of this short growing season is they have a festival called Harvest Moss. And you're probably wondering, what in the world is that? Harvest Moss is the name that they give it. Basically, it's a harvest festival. It lasts about a month. And what's interesting is they take and what is it? Yeah, they take literally everybody in the kingdom. They don't care who you are or what you're doing. They don't care if you're a peasant or a noble. Literally everybody has to get out there. You grab a sickle, you grab a basket. They got guys that are dukes and barons and stuff like this, and they're out there picking apples. They're out there doing out there doing hard labor. Now the older ones that can't do the physical labor anymore, they're managing everything. They're managing the food being brought in. They're managing how the fields are handled, all that kind of stuff. So, and you have literally because you got some short. When I say it's a month long, but they only have a 3-month harvesting thing. In the spring, they have kind of the reverse of this. They don't have a name for that, but it's just basically it's planting time. Harvest Moss is kind of like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and harvest time all in one big festival, and it lasts about a month. But in the spring, they do the same thing as they do in the fall, but in reverse. When the ground starts to thaw before you can actually plant anything, there's people out there. They're plowing, they're pruning, they're doing all the stuff you can do, in the period before you're required to actually go out and start planting. And like if you go. Like, they don't have nurseries, per se. Because they're still living very kind of medieval style. So you don't have these great big glass nurseries and stuff like that. But they do have ways that they can start the plants and get what plants that they have to going early. And they will go out there and they will plow the fields. And do everything they need to get these things ready for planting. And then the very, very first moment that they can plant, everybody's out there planting. You got like I said, you got whole groups of people just out there planting fields. You've got, they're going down the field and everybody's got, like, say, for example, you're planting wheat. Everybody's down there with a bag of wheat seeds and walking down the field. You might have one guy's a noble, baron or a duke or something like that. Next guy next to him is just some pauper or some peasant or something like that, and the next guy is another noble and stuff. And that is the only way they survive. Is literally everybody gets out there and they plant the fields, and then everybody gets out there and they harvest the fields. The farmers love it because what they do is they pay these people in food, which they don't mind. But this way they're not like struggling to get all their crops in before the snows come, because when winter shows up, it shows up fast and it shows up hard. And it's like 6 months of winter for them. Literally, it's just they have like a month in spring or month and a half, something like that, where they can do all their plowing and prepping and everything, and then they do their planting right before it warms up enough where the ground gets warm enough that they can, the plants will start growing. So, like I said, it's like 6 months of just hard winter, constant snow and stuff, and then all of a sudden in spring that breaks and just stops finally. And then everything starts thawing, but they got to wait for the ground to thaw before they can plow. And then they're out there, it's still like 30, 40 degrees during the day, but they're out there and they're plowing and they got their horses around and everything. And like I say, the older people, both peasant and noble alike, once they get to a certain age and they can't do the physical labor, then they go into kind of the leadership role where they're organizing, they're cataloging, they're making sure nothing is wasted. This whole kingdom, even though it's not heavily populated, they work together. They do a lot of stuff together. Like they'll also, because their fields and their livestock and stuff like that can't supply all their needs. So they'll go out on great big foraging parties, and they'll collect food. They'll have kind of these big preservation parties. Harvest Moss, like I say, is the biggest of all of this. This is like, yay, our food is in. Let's grab it before winter comes so that we can eat this winter. And one of the things you'll see right at the beginning of the Rise of Offworld, from the After Offworld series, is that literally every year when the Harvest Moss comes around, everybody's buckets and barrels and supplies are down to the end. They are just like in the bottom of the wheat barrel, just trying to get that last little bit of wheat to grind up to make flour, to make bread. And they're done. They're out of food. And there's a number of years where Harvest Moss comes and they don't have any food left. They've literally run out of food a week or two before. If they have a year where it's a bumper crop and it's a warm summer and they got their crops in early and there was a bumper crop, they actually stash that in the castle. The kingdom has a rule that we will give each person, we will pay each person in food, and when we bring the food in, what they'll do is they'll take, like, if you have a bumper crop year, if you have any food left over, you are required to turn that into the kingdom, and the king pays you for it. You're not like getting ripped off or anything. Some of it might be taken in taxes, but what they do is they take all, any year that they have a surplus, and they send it to the castle. Trying to think, the cat, and it's in Ayrton, but the capital there, they have like this great big castle there, and that castle it's defensive fortification. It's the king's residence, and it's also used to store spare food. And what they do is, on the years when they have a surplus, and they won't know that they have a surplus. I mean, they might have a really good crop, but it depends on what winter's like and how soon they can plant and stuff like this. If they come up to a surplus, and now let's say you put back 20 barrels of flour, or not flour, but wheat. You put back 20 barrels of wheat, and spring comes and you've got, Harvest Moss comes, and you've still got 2 barrels of wheat. You send those 2 barrels to the castle. Couple of years later, winter came early, we didn't get enough food, we're coming up to to Harvest Moss again, and we're out of food already, but we still got a couple of weeks till Harvest Moss. Okay, grab one of those barrels, bring it down, you can work out of that. So, like I say, and the community is okay with that. They, and you don't have, in this kingdom, you don't have the nobles abusing that because they know better than that. Because let's just say this much: if a noble gets caught abusing this food system, yeah, you're going to get tarred and feathered by a little bit of everybody, including the king. And the king's smart enough not to do that, because if he gets caught, the peasants will revolt and they will overthrow him, and they will put somebody in there that will protect them. Believe me, the nobles are scared of the peasantry. And the nobles also realize that if the peasantry turns against them, they're going to starve. So everybody, and the thing is, the nobles are raised in a way of, yes, you're rich, you're nobility, you're in charge, but don't let that go to your head. You're not some great big, you're not above your fellow human. You have a different place in society, but you also have different responsibilities. Being ennobled, you have responsibilities of leadership, management, things like this, things that the peasantry doesn't know or hasn't learned. Mathematics, accounting, things like that. So you have to help them be successful, and they will help you be successful, and both of you will come through this smelling like roses. So it's a very community-driven kingdom. Because, like I say, calling it a kingdom, I think, is almost kind of a misnomer. It is a kingdom. It is a nobility, but it's a very community-focused nobility. Like, you could have, say, somebody has a problem with, the mom's sick and they can't go out and forage, which they do. I mean, everybody in the kingdom, even the nobles, go out and forage during the summer, because you're looking to bring in berries and wild root vegetables and various things. You're going to go out and you're going to bring in game and you're going to preserve it. Anything to make it through the winter and survive. And like I say, they will rally around that person and say, okay, your mom's sick. Let us come in and see what we can do to help you. Try to stock your shelves for winter and stuff like this. And trust me, you don't want to do this thing and pretend that, oh, I'm weak, I can't do this. Because if they figure that out, you are getting lynched. Or if not lynched, certainly tarred and feathered. So, yeah, they're very, very community focused. They don't like dishonest people. And, like I said, going back to Professor Rogers, he lives up in this area. He actually helps them out. So he helps Terrafall with a variety of things. Now, during the race, he's kind of limited on how much he can help them, because there's the rules of the race, and there's also the Brotherhood over there, and they're kind of like, no, don't do that for them. We want them to suffer like this. And, because you got to remember, the Brotherhood is a bunch of sadistic, well, they're demons, but they're a bunch of sadistic, power-hungry freaks, and who love to see people suffer. Anyways, Professor Rogers is always trying his best in whatever way he can to teach the people in Terrafall, to help them out. He helps out the chief director. He helps out Maul. He helps out other people on the planet. Like I say, his hands are tied during the race, so there's not a lot he can do. But what he is able to do, he jumps in and helps him with it. Like I say, before he got saved and before he left Section 17, he was not benevolent like that. After he got saved and he woke up and then eventually left and moved to Terrafall, he actually became a very benevolent, very helpful individual, and he uses his vast knowledge to benefit the kingdom of Terrafall. So, let's see here. Dexter, Deben, Doss. Oh, here's Doss I was mentioning about. I don't have much more than this because she has a very small portion of this, but she is actually the girlfriend of a gang member who runs a gang in Chicago. I should probably flesh that out, but I'll do that eventually. Yeah, she's a friend of Arya, and she's actually, which is funny because, like I say, her her personality is kind of one of those lady greasers from like the early 50s. Remember Fonzie and the guys running. Like they even had, I think, in Indiana Jones, they showed in one of the movies. I think it was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They had a whole bunch of greasers. It was greasers versus preppies, which was hilarious because that was an actual thing back then. But yeah, she's kind of this greaser personality and appearance and stuff. And then you have Fredo, her boyfriend, who's in charge of one of the gangs, who has a beef with Fat Dog, which I'll show you him in a little bit. But yeah, she's like really good friends with Arya, and while she can't do a lot for Arya, she does help her out while she was in Chicago. Dr. Bach. Oh. Hey, look, I found another mistake. Yay. Yeah. Okay. Anyways. I didn't think he fit here. Okay, Ebenezer. Yeah, that's the pirate guy. Yep. Oh, this guy. This guy is fun. He is like the quintessential circus master. You run into him at the end of book 6, and he's also at the beginning of book 7. And what happens is Simon's team, they get out of Grootwand, and they start heading towards the giant mountains. And just in front of the giant mountains, because of all the giants that are there, the mountains themselves are surrounded by this huge wall that keeps the giants in the mountain. And it's maintained by a number of the local kingdoms. And in front of that wall is this big kind of medieval fortification, but its walls aren't like the normal type walls that you would think of in a medieval fortification. This thing is like, this castle that they come to is like crazy over-engineered because they know that it has to stand up against these giants that will be attacking it. So it is like over-engineered to the max to maximize its survivability. Not to mention it's also filled with just a crazy selection of weapons to take on those Nephilim if they ever show up. So it's a castle that's designed to defend against giants, and big giants too. Well, anyways, Edius operates he operates an air transit service. Because what it is when you come up to the giant mountains, you either have to go the long way around, which is like about a 2-week trip. At the fastest, it's about a 2-week trip. You have to go all the way around the outside of that wall and around the mountains to the other side, which is where you run into Terrafall and some other stuff like that. So what he does is there's one castle on one side, one castle on the other. They're identical, super over-engineered castles. And he runs, like I say, this airship. And this airship's interesting because I don't think I have a picture of that, but his airship is neat because it's a seagoing galleon. And you're thinking, wait, how is that an airship? Bear with me. The airship itself, the base of it is a seagoing galleon ship that is stripped of its masts because it doesn't need it. It's going up in the air. It's not actually sailing through the water, so it doesn't need the mast. So it's just the galleon body, and then on the main deck it has all of these like anchor points, and like they go down to these great big pins that go through the ship, and they're connected to the reinforcing structure stuff, and then connected to those pins are these hot air balloons. And hot air balloons are operated kind of interestingly because they don't have, like the gas burners like we do. It's more like, if you go back and research, I don't remember exactly where it was, whether it was in France or England or what it was, but the very first hot air balloon, they had this little basket which had a hole through the center of it, and they lit a fire, and the fire filled the balloon floated up for a ways, went over, and then floated back down. It's kind of that same idea. What they do is they have these little pots that they fill with like wood and coal and stuff like that, and they light these up and get them burning really, really hot. And yeah, it'd be like a wood stove, basically, is what these are. And they push hot air up into these balloons, and the balloons are kind of interesting because they are suspended on these stay poles. Because without the hot air, these things will deflate, and then they get down to the fire, catch fire, burn your ship down. So what they do is they have the balloons up on these stay poles, and they have this little pipe that goes up through the mouth of the balloon into the heart of it. Keeps the balloon material from catching fire because they have like this little chimney system that goes up in there. And it's an insulated chimney. Anyways, they'll stoke the fires, get the fires going really good, shove them in underneath the balloons. Hot air goes up and a balloon opens up, and they start pulling on the ship. Now the thing that's funny is, because of the weight of the ship, they can't take off with just the balloons. Now this is the other interesting part. If you remember about the crashed shuttles, the crashed controller shuttles, and the salvaging and stuff that goes on with those, that's the second part of the power system for that ship. Edius basically took some tech he bought. He bought some tech from some people who salvaged it from crashed controller shuttles. He took 4 engine nacelles. So there's like 2 per shuttle. So basically 2 shuttles worth of engines and the power cores that went with them, and built them into his little galleon. And it's really cool because when this thing's sitting on the ground, it looks like you're a hot air balloon based on a galleon, and you're just gonna inflate these balloons and float away. Well, yeah, like I say, but again, the balloons can't carry it. And what's funny is, when he's on the ground, yeah, I already said that it looks just like a regular galleon. When he's ready to take off, these nacelles extend out from the side of the ship. It's really cool because he has this little box in the back where the helm is. Flip that open, and there's this control console for the engines and the power cores and everything like that. So it looks, it looks fairly primitive. It looks kind of 1600s. Hey, flip that open. Here's 22nd century technology, or 23rd century, whatever you want to say it is. But it's this high-end controller interface, and they activate it, and out go these cells, which are stored when the thing's on the ground, and when it's in operation, they extend out so they can. Partially it's a balance thing. Partially it's just if you don't need them, why have them out? Plus, it looks kind of cool when they activate. And anyways, they kick in and go up to full power, and when they do that, then the blimp takes off because they provide the extra power needed to get this thing in the air. It doesn't climb fast, doesn't move fast, but it gets in the air and does its job. It climbs to like 10, 20,000 feet. And it's not high enough where you're needing oxygen yet, but it's up there a ways. And what he does is he then points toward, as he's climbing out. He'll climb vertically out of the castle and then go forward and climb up into the sky. And this thing literally has no helm wheel. Everything, all your steering and your flight controls and everything are through this little box. So you're flying it like it's a gigantic shuttle, but it's basically a modified wooden galleon with air balloons and shuttle engine technology. But anyways, he'll take and just slowly climb higher and higher as he's heading towards the giant mountains, and he'll fly over the giant mountains, go to the other side, and then land in the opposing castle. And this is his service, and he goes back and forth with this thing. But yeah, like I say though, when you look at him and his crew members, you swear you're going to a circus, not an air transit company, because he literally has that ringmaster feel to him. His personality, how he acts, and just everything. The guy is a hoot. Like I said, you only see him for a little bit in the end of the 6th book and the beginning of the 7th book, but he's a cool one. You would really enjoy him. I'll just touch on Ika. She shows up in The Rise of Offworld, so you haven't actually met her, so I'm not going to say much on her, but she actually is a very cool, and she forms the Canine Council, which again is touched on at the end of The Rise of Offworld, but will be covered more in the Guardians of Offworld, which is coming up in the future. Yeah, here we go. Here's Esther. Esther is just cool. She's this kindly old widow that helps Susan and the remnants of her team, what's left of them by the time that she gets there. And it's not like a lot of bad stuff happens to Susan's team. It's just that as they're going along, they kind of calve people off, and God's like, okay, I want you to stop here and do ministry here, and I want you to stop here and do ministry here. So her team, like I said before, her team serves to kind of give you a different viewpoint on the trail and the world of Offworld and stuff like that. And along the way, she's dropping off people to various places to do ministry. So she's kind of out, she thinks she's out on a race, and she's actually out on a missions trip, or ends up being out on a missions trip. But yeah, Esther does a lot to help her out, and kind of acts like this mom figure to her and the others. Yeah, we covered Fallon. Fat Dog. This dude is the quintessential gangster. You do not screw with this guy. This guy will kill you for just the smallest slight. Arya tries to run a scam. Her and her friends try to run a scam against him. He captures them, and right before she's brought to Offworld, she's in line to be executed. And like I said, this guy is ruthless. He'll kill you for just no good reason. That's the kind of person he is. Yeah, he doesn't, he's mentioned occasionally. Even Trevor's kind of impressed where she mentioned, yeah, I was running a scam against Fat Dog. He's like, wait. It's like, wait, you ran a scam against Fat Dog? Wow, you're brave. So, even he knows enough to leave Fat Dog alone. Okay, here's Fredo. I got to flesh him out more too. Here we go. Frederick. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay, he's not the one I'm thinking of. The other one I'm thinking of is Jeremy. Frederick is a footman. He goes with Susan. He's cool. He's kind of, he's a footman and a servant in Susan, a.k.a. the Baroness's house of Hollow Manor. But he goes along with her and the rest of the team members. And when they finally get to Esther's house, it's just Arthur, Dexter, Susan, and Frederick. But Frederick's a fun guy. He's really cool. He helps her out kind of in a semi-servant's role, but also in a racer's role. Because he's a racer just like she is. And he rejoins her on the trail. And he's really cool. I'll touch on Jeremy real quick. But this guy right here is the bomb. He is the head butler of Hollow Manor. And he is a great advisor, very smart guy, very grounded. And he runs Hollow Manor for Susan. She, for the Baron, for AKA the Baroness. He literally runs the whole manor and does everything for them. He's the head butler, so he's directly under Susan. He's her top employee. And when she goes on the trail, he takes over and manages the estate. When the races ended, the two other Christian lords who they weren't racers, they were like third and fourth generations, I think. But anyways, they come to him with a letter from Susan saying, "Hey, Jeremy, you're now the Baron of Hollow Manor." So he ends up going from being a butler to a Baron, and he is a little hesitant because he is very much a servant, and he even when he becomes Baron, it takes him a while to come out of that mindset. But even then, he's still a servant, just in a different stripe. But he's really cool. Very, very noble, very smart person. He cares for people, cares for his staff. He runs the house very, very well, runs the property very well. He's a really cool dude. You get to meet him in Offworld Chronicles, and you get to meet him in After Offworld. So... Oh, you've met Garloon, but here's one of my favorite villains, General Amaroth. This guy is just evil incarnate. There's a bunch of them that are evil incarnate, but this guy's definitely evil incarnate. He takes up his story fills probably the second half of Dragon's Gambit. He is a 3-star general in the Unity Army, and he ends up leading the Unified Army. And the Unified Army is basically armies from the 4 kingdoms that come together, realizing that, because they normally would work together to make sure no racers get past them, and and into the further areas further down the trail. Which Subton is kind of funny because they kind of help those people. They don't help them exclusively. Like every racer that comes to them, they help them. It's not that way. They help certain people if they think have a chance, and they get past the Unity and Sheffield and the other two. And anyways, that during the war, they realized that because of their little skirmish back and forth, the little spat that they're having, and it really is a spat because they're just basically sitting there they're occasionally having infantry engagements, they're exchanging artillery fire, they're having tank battles. They come in, shoot at each other, leave. Come in, shoot each other, leave. It's kind of an informal war. But it's distracted them enough that Simon's team get through. So what they do is the general puts together a task force. It's not a big task force because they don't really need a big task force, but at the same time they kind of go they go very overboard in a sense. They make they're basically, they bring so much firepower with them. We're going to make absolutely positively certain that these guys die before they get any further, which is part of why Ruby ends up getting razzed and burned to the ground and everybody killed, is because he comes looking for them there because he gets word that, hey, they wandered through Ruby. We want to find out where they are, and you guys tell us. And Ruby's like, up yours. So he burns it down and kills everybody. That's the kind of person he is. He is the primary reason why Alex dips out, because Alex doesn't dip out. Alex gets killed by Amaroth's forces, not like the unified army that comes out later. This is just Unity forces. He brings a couple of companies with him, trying to track down Simon's team and kill him. And Alex, being SAS, he's like, yeah, I'm going to go buy you guys some time to get out of here, and just goes up there and boss modes Amaroth's forces. The problem is, and he basically one-man armies the defense against Amaroth's forces, but he ends up dying, and the funny thing is, the only reason he dies is he runs out of ammunition. Otherwise, as long as he's got ammunition, he's up there just, he's just soloing this, the fight against Amaroth's men. That's how OP he is. He may be old, but he's SAS, and he just like I say, just boss modes Amaroth's forces. And he literally goes out in a blaze of glory, which is, and here's the funny part is, the reason I did that with Alex is I realized about halfway through the book that, wait a second, once I hit a certain point here, I don't need Alex anymore. So I'm like, I'm going to send him out in the blaze of glory. The running joke with that is I Obi-Wanned him, referencing, the fact that Obi-Wan, or that George Lucas did the same thing with Obi-Wan in Star Wars. So I kind of did my own little Obi-Wanning of Alex, and so far everybody loves it. I mean, they're sad to see him go, but they love it. And like I say, he just goes out in the most epic way possible. Totally, a totally Alex way, the way that he would want to go. Anyways, you got to read that. Like I say, that fight and the way he handles that is so epic. And it's one of those things that I'm sure a lot of you were like, wait a second, he dips out of the team. What did he do? Quit or walk away or something? No, he died. But that his leaving allows the story to move forward without being clunky and cumbersome and things like that. Because when I originally had him in there and continuing on with the team, the story got clunky and top heavy, and it created all kinds of problems. By offing him, it gave him an out. It allowed me to remove him and change the dynamic of the story, making it actually better. And as you read it, you'll understand that, yeah, it's actually better that that he left the team, and it's good that he left the team in the most epic way possible, as a nod and a badge of honor to him as he goes out the door. But yeah, it's General Amaroth who ends up offing him. And Amaroth gets his just desserts later on. The dragons make sure of that one. Let's see. Gannon. Okay, that's a different guy. I'm not going to cover him. He's a character in the Children of Offworld. Or, not Offworld, excuse me, Children of Ember. So he's a character I'm still working on. I got notes on him just because I needed him. But anyways, yeah, he's a future character. He's in there just for my reference, so I have him for when I start writing that, because he'll be an important character. Henrietta Hensley. She is the chief maid for Professor Diedrich Rogers, and she is a Karen. Not like, I want to speak to your manager. She's just like you look at the picture here, she is very much about perfection. She is a perfectionist. She is just, and like, she doesn't like things that upset her world. She gets very or disturbs the flow of things and stuff like this. It just, she is, I'm trying to think of a good word to describe her, but she is just very, I shouldn't say cold. She's very brash, very harsh. But at the same time, she cares a lot for the professor. She cares a lot for the staff. She doesn't express that very well. She's, she kind of is very bad at expressing that correctly. Because, like, she would go in there to make sure, go into the kitchen and talk to the chef to make sure that, the professor's taken care of. And just basically eat this guy, or just chew this guy up one side and down the other. It's like, that's not how you handle this, this situation. You go in there, you talk nicely to him, you're very professional to him and stuff. You don't sit there and just chew this guy up and spit him out. She's doing it with the right motives in mind, just not in the right way. So, but the professor knows why she's doing it. He tolerates her. The staff kind of wishes he wouldn't, but he tolerates her, and she does look after the staff, even if she is a little bit on the rough side. She kind of fills in. There is a butler. Even he doesn't like her. I mean, well, he likes her because she gets stuff done, but he also doesn't like her because this woman has no filter. So, like I say, she's a Karen, but a different kind of Karen. She's a caring Karen, I guess, so you could say. Let's see. We did Ramiro, Jethal. Yeah, Jethal is the Weir Master of Riathrin. This is Riathrin's the Weir of the Sea. This thing is literally, it's just like all the other ones that it's a weir built inside a mountain, or in their case, it's built inside of an extinct volcano, and it's in the middle of the Great Sea. And his territory for that weir is the Great Sea. They don't go west, because that belongs to the two weirs to the west. He doesn't go to the east because that belongs to Maul and Kestrel Weir. But his dragons operate across the Great Sea, and they're trained on how to fly across open water and long expanses of open water, which is actually not easy to do because the air currents are different. problems with sinking air, things like that, which is one of the reasons Rathan is such a good flyer and a good flight instructor, because he trained and operates within the most difficult flying conditions on Offworld, which has allowed him to really sharpen his skills. And the flyers there in Riathrin are just top-notch flyers. See, we already did Jeremy. Caruth, we did her. Kipo, he's kind of a side mention. Vegelus, I've mentioned him. Koenig. Oh, here we go. Melor. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much about him, but he's in book 3 of the After Offworld series, The Rise of Offworld. And he runs Subton. He's not the mayor. He's kind of the chief operating officer in a sense. This guy, he is just all business, all numbers. He is just by the book. and he ends up becoming kind of this. He becomes the arch nemesis of Chester Westman, and he is so cool. And I mean, like I said, I'm not gonna say more about that until the books come out, because you can read about him once they do. But he is a really cool dude. Like I say, very down to earth, very businessy. Trying to think of something else to describe him. This is one of the things I hate about getting old, is you can't think of stuff like you used to. Anywho, let's see. Martha Miller, Miltalk. Yeah, we did him. Okay, Oculus. That one's future. That's Children of Ember. I'll cover him at a different time. Orbis. He's from the first Hexton. He's the leader of the bandits. Rupert Wendell. Oh, Rupert's an interesting one. I got a lot on him, even though he's only a temporary character. He leads a team of 3 other members. Originally it was 4 other members, but I realized the 4th member didn't actually do anything. So I took him out and I made it just 3 members, or 3 additional members. But he is... You get to see him initially in Book 7 as a flashback, where he first arrives on the planet. He was in college at the time. And... Oh, crud. Tell you what, I just ran over again. I apologize. I just realized that. Got myself on a roll here again and ran over. Sorry. So we'll stop here. I'll pick up on the next one. We'll start with Rupert, and we'll finish up the rest of the characters and go through some of the other stuff from there. So catch you guys on the next video.